Hey guys, kinggath here with Bethesda Mod School. In this lesson, we're going to make the next type of common simple quest that I think a lot of you are going to want to make, which is a kill quest. You want to have something where you get credit for a kill and it updates a quest objective. So we're going to take the same approach as we have with the previous two, which is I'm going to keep these very simple. We're not going to have any NPC dialogue yet. We're going to keep scripting to a bare minimum, and I'm just going to try and teach you the basic building blocks so that you can kind of combine all these elements and make more and more complex quests. So our quest is going to basically, we're going to have it spawn an NPC that you have to kill, and once you kill it, you'll go back and we'll ring our trusty bell again. We're going to keep using that bell. I like it. Feels appropriate. Just go up and hit ding. I almost want to throw a timer in so you can race and see how quickly you can do the quest. Maybe that'll be tutorial 104. Who knows? But we're going to start from again a copy of the previous one. So I've just duplicated that so that I can include it in the toolkit. And the first thing we're going to do is rename some stuff because I had forgotten to do that previously and ended up causing some issues with some of my script names that I had caught off camera that you guys didn't have to see. But so let's go ahead and start by renaming our quest. So we're going to call this 103 Kill Quest. And then we're going to come in here and we're going to rename our script just to make sure we don't lose track of it. So we'll name it to match Kill Quest. As you can see, it's still at some point in the previous lesson, I showed you guys how to namespace that. I'm going to try and get in the habit of that whenever I'm doing stuff, is namespacing all of the stuff for these going forward, just to get you guys in that habit. If you see me do it a lot, you might hopefully pick that up and start doing it. Just make your lives a lot easier in the long term when you're trying to release your stuff. Okay, so now we're going to save once again now that we've made those changes. So just like the previous lesson, we're going to start by setting up the things that we want to happen. So we'll first put our objects in the world, and then we will handle the setting up the stages, and then we'll go through and do all of the scripting. So the first thing we need is an enemy to kill. So I'm going to actually go ahead and delete this blowtorch because we don't need it anymore for this one. And just a reminder, you are going to get this because it's being used by something else. So this is saying that this quest is using that item, so we want to be certain. So you'll get this a lot if you are deleting things from an existing thing like this, or if you try and delete anything of Bethesda's. And once again, I've come in before I've even started working in a world space. Another great habit to get in, and I should probably just start showing this on camera, is to any of the Bethesda layers that you might want to be using, have them freezed by hitting the F there. Make sure you have your own custom layer here and active, so anything you drop ends up on your own layer, and that way you don't have to worry about accidentally causing dirty edits in your mod, which is just a great habit to get into when you're working in Bethesda's cells or in the overworld of the Commonwealth. All right, so first we need an enemy to kill. So we're going to stick with the tried and true Rad Roach, and you can find enemies under Actor, and generally what you'll want to do is search for LVL, and then a star, and then the part of the enemy name. And LVL is for leveled character, and what that'll mean is that the character will be appropriate for the zone that you're in, and then I think there's also a scale to player level, but I think mostly it has to do with encounter level. I haven't figured out the full formula for this. Something I've been battling for the sake of Conqueror, because we do a lot of stuff with leveled NPCs, and I've still hasn't fully clicked for me exactly how the formula works. But if any of you has any information on that and you know the specifics, I would definitely be interested in knowing that. I think it would be worth a tutorial series all on its own. All right, so we're going to just take this level Rad Roach here, and we're going to just drop it into our map. And you'll see that when you get a leveled character, it just turns into this M with this arrow, and that's going to show you which direction they're facing. Once again, I'm going to do the same thing with the blowtorch. I'm going to unhide all this, and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to lift it up a little bit and hit F and make sure that it's on the nav mesh. Because if you put an NPC below the nav mesh or too high above, they end up getting they can get positioned randomly, and sometimes they can get dropped underneath the map. So if you've ever seen a quest objective where there's an enemy under the map, usually that happens on little hills and stuff because part of the nav mesh will fall underneath the hill, and so technically that's a legit spot for an NPC to be under that world space, because Bethesda uses, and they have no choice, they use mostly an automated generator to generate the nav mesh of their world space, and then they do manual tweaks where necessary, but covering every square inch of this giant space is just not feasible. So that's where you get a lot of those nav mesh issues, and I think it's a constant thorn in the unofficial patch team's side to have to deal with all those. Anyway, we're going to just try and avoid those issues by just using that F key to lower them down to a correct spot on the nav mesh. So this is leveled, so if you had a non-leveled character, if you just had a default Rad Roach, and let's see if they even have one that we could demonstrate this with. So if we grab an ENC Rad Roach, then you actually get the model of the NPC. So don't be alarmed by this M. And one of the things you can do, if you're really concerned about the exact positioning, positioning. And generally it won't matter because there will be AI involved. But a trick you could do is you can place down one of the ENC versions, and then you hit Control F, and then you can uncheck this same base type object, and then you can search in this replace with list. So if we search here, we gotta wait till this loads, because when you uncheck same base, it takes a long time because it has to load every single form possible in the CK right here to place. But then we can start typing in elf level radroach and hit OK, and it will replace it in such a way that it matches up exactly with the scale and position and everything, so that it'll be more appropriate to what you'd expect. And then you have the rotation based on what you would expect there. So that replaced it nicely there. And then when we open up this little properties for our leveled thing, you'll see that there's a leveled actor tab. And by default, it will have a level modifier of, I believe it starts as easy generally. I think because I did that swap, it switched it to none. But you can change how difficult you want the enemy to be. And that will be, again, I'm fairly certain it's relative to the encounter zone. And then I think this is my theory, and I will happily make a tutorial on this once I learn the absolute conclusion. But I believe that the encounter zone is determined by the actual location that you're in, and that's designed so that certain areas of the game feel easier than others, which makes sense. And then I think that there's a level of player scaling as well, is that the type of NPC that will appear, it also is limited by the level of the player. So it's a combination of those things. But the level modifier here, you can basically, do you want this, what is the challenge level you want for that zone? So very hard would be something that would be like a boss. Easier going to be that kind of cannon fodder type enemy that they get one shot, and then medium and hard or somewhere in between. We're going to go ahead and make this a very hard radroach, and we'll hit OK there, and then you can see it turns to red. So the color will match up with the difficulty level, and each one has a slightly different tone from I think green. I think it goes green, yellow, orange, red, and I wouldn't even call this red. I guess that's kind of a pink. But anyway, this M here with that little arrow, that means it's a leveled character, and that is what we want. So we set that up. So now we're going to let's hide our main layer, our default layer again, to keep it so we can just see our items. And we're going to keep our bell. So we know that we've got our thing set up. Basically, we're going to have the player walk into that box. So let's open up our stages, and we'll talk this through because this is my next favorite step. But basically, we're going to have them get the objective by walking in this box. We're going to tell them to kill the NPCs, to kill the radroach. So let's update our stage. So we'll say kill the radroach menace. Make it seem a little more intimidating. And then player rang bell. We want that to be the case. So this is those are the steps that our quest is going to take, nice and simple. And then we'll have to set up some other things here. So we're going to need to set up our quest alias, because right now we had one that was setting up pointing to the blowtorch, which is gone. Now we need to point it to our little NPC here. So let's go ahead and save again before we mess with the aliases tab. The objectives and the aliases, those are just to get in the habit of saving constantly. So we'll start by changing the name of our alias just to make sure that's very clear to us. And we can now test something that I talked about in the second tutorial about properties at naming after aliases. And if any of you followed my second one recently, you'll know what I'm talking about. But we're going to name this radroach, and we're going to hit, we're actually going to uncheck quest object. We don't need this to be a quest object because the player's not going to be picking it up. And then we're going to hit select forced reference and double click our M. And now keep in mind that quest object was only checked in because I'm reusing a quest. If we were starting a quest from scratch, so if you're jumping into this having not followed my previous two tutorials, what you would be doing instead is hitting new reference alias and then just double clicking this, and then hitting select reference and pointing it to that radroach. So I'm reusing a quest, which is why you're seeing me just do some edits and stuff. And if you want to reuse one of my quests and follow along exactly, that stuff is available in the Bethesda Mod School resources, which are on Nexus and will be linked in the description. All right, so now we've got this radroach set up as our alias pointing to here. We're going to hit OK and save this again before we go into the dreaded objective screen where I have crashed many times. So then we're going to update our objective. So this is what will actually display to the player, and we're going to say kill the radroach menace. And this is where we actually should have said the word menace. So we got to remember that the quest stages up here, this the player never sees. This is just for your notes. So this is, so the way I like to type these things is I type them from the perspective of what do I have expected to have happened when this stage triggers. So player killed radroach. as opposed to objectives. So that was poor writing for me. I just lost track of where I was. But the reason to write them in that phrase is just so that you can start thinking in the mind space of, all right, when this stage happens, this is when the stage occurs. So when when we're thinking about what to put in our papyrus and we're thinking about the logic the quest goes through, if you phrase it like that, you're basically saying things like this right here, the player's first objective. It might make more sense to name this player entered trigger box. So this is a good way to get in the habit of thinking about stages related to actual in-game events. So player entered the trigger box, and then stage 10 happens. Player kills the rad roach, and then stage 20 happens. Player rings the bell, and stage 30 happens. Now we actually got to go make these stages happen, but 2 of them we've already got set up because we're using a quest. And just naming them in that scheme of thinking about it from the perspective of once this stage occurs, we know this thing happened, will make it easier, I think, for you to follow along. And I should have done that in the previous tutorial, so apologies to any of you who are having to relearn something like that. This is why I want to constantly be improving my methods and giving you guys my latest thoughts on all this stuff, because it's constantly evolving. The more I build quests in this game, I've been building quests for it for about 2 years now, and every time I add a new quest, I learn something new and think about this a little bit differently. And it's just slowly I'm getting better at it, and it's getting easier for me to build future quests. And so hopefully I can instill some of these improvements. And I'm still seeing improvements just trying to talk it out to you guys. And so this is one right here where if I haven't been doing it in my own quest, I'm going to make sure I do that. I'll always phrase these from the perspective of this is the event that just occurred that caused this stage to trigger. And I think doing it that way is a good way. And then if you wanted to add an additional note to be like, we should display first objective, you could do that. And you can do whatever you want. This is your notes. But for the way I'm teaching of setting up your stages as a method of outlining your own logic, of trying to puzzle your way through how do you want this quest to play out before you actually start implementing, I think that phrasing is a good way to go. Think about it from like what event will occur in the game. So we're gonna hit OK. I'm going to save that once again. And again, I'm just doing that over and over again to make sure it doesn't crash. We don't lose our work. So we're going to have to set up a few things here. So first we have our trigger box was already set up from our previous tutorial. It's going to set up stage 10, and our ring the bell is set to stage 30. So we know those are good to go. So now we need to know when the player killed this rad roach. So again, we're going to go and add a script on our little guy here. And now note that this is generally considered bad form to put scripts right on particular NPCs. It's fine, it will work, but generally you would put these on the aliases, but aliases are such a complicated screen to look at and so advanced. I'm going to skip that for now. We'll do that again in the future. But if you are an experienced quest maker, you might be thinking, why are you putting scripts on these objects? You should be putting on the aliases. Yes, I know, but I think this is easier for people to understand. Like this particular thing is what we want to trigger the quest or trigger the stage, whereas aliases, that extra layer of having that kind of invisible box that holds the thing is a little confusing. I've been trying to avoid them as much as I can, but I know I can't due to the way objectives work. So for those of you guys who know there's a better way to do this, it's okay. I'm just doing this simple to teach people who are trying to learn from the beginning, as well as any of you who are just here hoping to maybe pick up some little tidbits you didn't know. So we're going to go ahead and search once again for default ref. This is where we find Bethesda's pool of useful little pre-done scripts. And we're going to look for default ref on death. So we're going to trigger something on death. And just like the other default ref, it all has the same basic pattern of you can set the quest here. So we'll search for our quest. 103 kill quest. And stage to set, we want it to set stage 20. And then one of the things we can do here is we can look at some of these other things. We want to make sure in this case that it's only killed by the player, for example. We don't want them to die by something else, but I guess it really doesn't matter. And the problem with if we're going to set it to only be killed by the player, we probably need to prevent it from getting killed by anything else, or the player won't be able to complete the quest. And for that, I think there's a better way to do this. So if we want to make it only the player can do it, I'm going to show you how we do that. So we're going to hit OK here. So now we've got once this thing dies, it's going to set stage 20. But let's say we want to make sure that only the player can kill it. So that way they get the credit for this kill. We can actually do a little trick here. If we go to the rad roach in our alias, and we're learning some more advanced alias stuff, we can make it protected. And there's two flags here, essential and protected. You'll have seen tons of NPCs with these. Essential means nobody can kill it, not even the player, without specifically running a special command. So this tends to be what your companions would have, or the major faction NPCs that are important for the quest stories. Some of those will have essential, not all of them, but mostly your companions are good examples of that. And then protected are NPCs where you can kill them as the player, but nobody else can. A common example you would see would be the settlers. All of those are by default protected depending on which mods you have installed. And so we can actually set this flag rather than on the NPC's record. We can set it on this alias and it will apply to that NPC that's in this alias. So this is one of the things with aliases where all of the metaphors I keep coming up with are a little bit wrong. So the last time I talked about this, I've been trying to think of the perfect metaphor for this. Last time I came up with the idea of the invisible box and that you're working on what's inside of it. So in this case, if we assume that our radroach reference alias is an invisible box and inside right now is this radroach, then any of these checkboxes will get applied to that radroach. But that's not even entirely true because some of these checkboxes specifically have to do with the invisible box. It's really hard to find a perfect metaphor. Hopefully you guys, just by seeing all these examples, it'll slowly start to click, because I know this is one of the most complicated parts of quest design to wrap your head around. But in this case, checking in this protected flag means that whatever NPC is here, that is inside this invisible box, this alias, that they are they're treated like they have the protected thing on their NPC record, so they can't be killed by anyone but the player. So we'll do that and we'll call that good enough. So now we're gonna hit OK once again, since we made a little change on the alias screen. So now we've got it set up so that we already know running of the trigger box is gonna go to stage 10. Killing this radroach will go to stage 20, and ringing that bell will go to stage 30. Well, here's a little thing that I just thought about, and this is something we would have run into in the game, but we'll go ahead and just fix it now. So, and this will also be a nice little new thing you can learn. What if the player finds this NPC before they find this quest? Well, now the quest is going to pop up that they killed it and they're going to get credit for it and they get told to ring the bell. I think it would be better if instead the NPC appeared after the quest was received. So let me show you how to do that. So we're going to go up in here and we're going to go onto radroach and bring up the alias, and we're going to do two things to make this happen. First, we're going to hit allow disabled, and disabled means it's kind of in this hybrid, it's this like hibernation state. It exists in the game world, but the player can't see it. It doesn't, if it's an NPC, it's not active. It's just invisible, holding its position, can't be interacted with. It exists. It doesn't exist at all in the game as far as you're concerned as a player when you're in there, but it does. The game world is aware of it, and so we can enable it later, and enabling will make it as if it was there all along. So we're going to go ahead and click on here and hit initially disabled. So we double clicked our radroach leveled object, hit initially disabled. So now this thing is not going to exist in that quest. So we need to make sure that it gets enabled. So right by default, when the player loads up the game, if they run over here, this radroach won't be here. We're going to make it so that it appears once the quest starts. So to do that, we're going to open up our quest here. And we are going to go, and there's probably an alias shortcut quest for it, but I don't know it, or a script that Bethesda's written. I just don't know it offhand. So I'm just going to show you guys how to do it manually. So we're going to go here. So we know set objective displayed 10. Objective 10 is going to be kill the radroach. So we'll do it right here. So after they enter the trigger box, we want to enable that radroach. So to do that, and we're actually going to do it before we display the objective, because if the radroach is disabled, and the radroach is our objective 10, then when the objective gets displayed, there won't be a map marker because that guy is disabled. So we need to enable him first. So first we need to get access to this radroach. So I showed you guys in the previous quest how to do this, and we're going to do the same basic thing. We're going to set up a property, and we're going to point it to the alias. Now in this case, we already had this blowtorch alias set up, so we're just going to reuse it. Actually, we can't. I forgot we can't reuse these. So this is a little, so you get a little advanced lesson. When you're editing scripts, if you want to remove things from fragments, just the only reason we're going to do this is because we're in we copied our quest. Normally you wouldn't have to do this. In fact, because that's going to get confusing, I'm torn now if I want to show you guys this or not. Okay, for those of you guys who find scripting intimidating, you're new to this, just ignore what I'm about to show you outside of this screen here. For those of you guys who are comfortable with scripting, this might be useful to you. But if you go to the advanced tab and hit edit script, and I got pull this over here. If you go down to the bottom, you will find your aliases, and you can delete them and edit them right here. Now, the key thing is if you edit them, you also want to edit them anywhere up here where they're found. So this, again, might be too advanced for some of you, but if you know about aliases and stuff and they don't scare you or quests don't scare you, you can come up here and edit this stuff, and then we can save it, and then when we recompile the script, it will actually take our changes. And we actually don't need this, we don't need this blowtorch anymore. So we'll go ahead and just delete that, and we'll delete that old script there, and we'll go ahead and save this. And then we're going to close this guy, and we're going to come back in here, and we're going to hit compile again. And it's going to give us some errors. Let's see here, and that is probably because I left a blowtorch alias in somewhere. Let's see here. Oh, I know what it is. I think it's still probably written in the CK. Oh, yep, okay. Let's go here. There we go. That's why, because this quest didn't actually remove it. So this is a little odd thing with editing the scripts. It warns you about this, and I just ignored the warning. It says, here, I'll bring this over on the screen again. Do not anything between this and the end comment. And that's fair. I should have followed suit on this. So it basically ignored all that because the CK has it loaded in memory. This part, the stuff down here, you'll notice that the properties are outside of the do not edit anything between this and the beginning comment. So these we can safely edit, so we could rename our aliases this way. So that's fine. We'll take the penalty there for not listening. But we're gonna go ahead and just manually fix it right here, and then we'll go ahead and delete this. All right. So now we're going to compile this again, and I'm going to walk back through this. So now, those of you guys who didn't follow through on that edit scripting, let's show it from scratch. So for people who are still having trouble with this, with the objective thing, or the fragments rather, we're going to go ahead and start this from scratch. So we're going to delete our fragment here, yes, and then we're going to hit OK, so that'll save. And we're going to start from scratch. We're going to do this whole one. It'll be a nice exercise to remember where we're at with all this. So. Okay, the player entered the trigger box. What do we want to happen? Well, we first need to make our guy enabled. He's disabled right now. He doesn't exist in the game world as far as the player is concerned. So let's enable him. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get access to him. So to do that, we go to properties. Yeah, and the script is still there. Well, why is it still there? This is why. Okay, this is, we have to delete it on all of them apparently. All right, we'll go ahead and do that. It's deleted, hit OK. This is something I never do, so I didn't even have experience of that, of needing to delete it on everything. Okay, so now let's see what happens if we go to properties again. No, it still is just clinging to that quest. So I guess lesson learned, children, don't reuse quests like this. We'll deal with it. We'll go ahead and just get properties. It's already set up here. No, we need to fix this for the sake of you guys learning this. All right, let's figure this out. I'm gonna pause this. We'll get this edited. All right, so now, and you saw a little screen jump there. I decided to strip the script out of this one so I could walk back through that from the beginning in case anybody was jumping into this in the middle and they would not have to see me struggle to reuse an old script. Anyway, this guy now being initially disabled means he won't appear until we tell him to. So let's do that. So I've removed this script that we had on our previous one that we used. And to do that, you have to go into the folder where it is and actually physically delete the file, and then relocate, and then hit on each of these. It's if you're trying to reuse a quest, I don't recommend it. It's for doing script stuff. And so maybe I'll stop doing the reuse of quests for the future tutorials for that sake. But you have to go to each individual fragment, hit delete frag on the advanced tab, then go delete the actual physical file. It's a big hassle. But anyway, I've already done that in the background. So we have to reset up all of our stuff. So we know we want objective 10 to display. We want to go to kill the rad roach to pop up for the player. But before that will even work is the rad roach has to be enabled. So in order to do that, we need to set up a script property. So we're going to do the same thing we did in the previous video. And actually before properties will even enable, we have to have some sort of script here. So since we know we're going to eventually do set objective displayed 10 to get that objective to show up, we'll go ahead and compile with that, and that way we'll be able to add properties. So now that I've got it compiled, before we even go to properties, I'm going to go here and make sure this is where I want it. And you can see that it did go into KG questing. I assume that's because I reused. I think in general, it's not going to go to your subfolder unless you rename it and point it there. There is a way in the properties to set a default namespace. I choose not to use that because for fragments and things like that, it might not be a good idea because the namespace won't be anywhere like that. I don't do it because I work on so many different mods that have so many different namespaces, but you guys might want to. Maybe it's a good idea for all of your stuff to go into one special namespace, and you can find that. I think it's under Edit Preferences. Okay, so we've got our script compiled. I checked that it's renamed. It's in our appropriate folder. So now we're going to go to Properties here, and we are going to, why can't I add a property? I might have to hit OK, and yeah, I bet this is what it is. Probably have to save. This is, you'll find this occasionally on different things, that scripts require, before they are fully functional, all the forms, quests are in particular like this, you sometimes have to hit OK or apply and then save your plugin before you can get access to everything. So let's see if that fixed it. Yep, there we go. Add property. And so the same thing we did in the last tutorial where we were going over how to set up the blowtorch so that we could access the alias. We're going to try and do the same thing here. And I don't remember what I named it. I think I did it with a capital R, and that might matter. We're going to try this thing again. I talked about that. It's supposed to be that if you just add alias to the end of the name of something, it'll catch it. And maybe it's alias before. I'm not sure, but it's supposed to autofill. Let's see if that did it. No, it's still not autofilling. Whatever, it's not hard to do this. RuinedWorld, so maybe it's alias first. There's a way to make this autofill. I just don't remember what it is. But I'm fine having to pick that. We don't have enough aliases where it's a big problem yet. So we're setting up this alias so that we can get access to our little RuinedWorld buddy here. So we're going to hit OK. Now what we're going to do is, because we want to enable our RuinedWorld first, excuse me, we're going to enter a line here and then just start typing above that. And the way these fragments work is each line gets run one after the other. So they happen sequentially. So since we want our enable to happen before the objective pointing to that RuinedWorld happens, we want it to go above there. So we're going to do RuinedWorld alias. Oops. Oh my God. I have my keyboard on a weird angle right now. Alias. And then we're going to use a little function called try to enable. And that will make it try to enable that thing. And the try, to me, implies it might fail, which is never great. Another way you could go about this, we talked about in the example with the blowtorch, we had talked about how you could get the item inside the box. The aliases are invisible box. You get the item inside by doing getref. You could do the same thing here. So another way to type this would be RuinedWorld alias.getref.enable. And this one lacks the try to, which I like. The try to I've never had one on try to fail. I'm sure there's a reason for that they used that particular naming source. Maybe it's a matter of if there was nothing in this invisible box, the alias was empty, then the try to is a sensible way to name that. But these two lines effectively do the same thing, and obviously one is shorter, so you should probably use the shorter one. That's generally the best idea with code, is if two things do the exact same thing, save yourself the typing. So here we're going to enable our RuinedWorld so that he's now in the world again. The player can see him and interact with him, and then we'll hit objective displayed to show off our objective. So there's the first stage. So now we have a way for the player to interact with and see our little RuinedWorld after the quest starts when they run into that trigger box. Then when they kill the RuinedWorld, we want to complete that objective. So now we're redoing stuff we've done in the previous tutorial. Set objective completed. Oops, I typed that backwards. Set objective completed, and that is objective 10. And where I'm getting these numbers, we actually haven't set it up in this. I don't know if we set it up in this video or not. Yes, we did. Okay, so 10 and 20 are our two objectives. Let's see here. Set objective completed. So they killed the RuinedWorld, so we want to mark the little kill the RuinedWorld menace complete, and then we want to display the objective telling them to go ring the bell. So set objective displayed, and that one is 20. And then we'll compile that again. And then we'll come to when the player rings the bell. We're going to use that one from the last tutorial, which was complete all objectives. And if we didn't want to do complete all objectives for some reason, we could also do set objective completed 20, and that would do the same thing in this case. But this is just a good catch-all to make sure that anything that you skipped in your objectives, if you had a more complicated quest, would all get marked off as complete. And then we'll go ahead and compile this, and then we'll pop in game and confirm that this all works correctly. Oh, and we should probably remember to save our plugin. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is go and verify that our RuinedWorld was indeed started disabled. He's not crawling around over here. Oh, he's not here. Oh, and somehow I lost my weapon. Oh, I guess That's something I did with this save file. No good. Oh well. Okay, so we don't have a... We can punch him to death. That's fine. So we don't have the red roach there. So now let's run in here into our trigger space and make sure that the quest starts. There we go. Oh, I forgot to rename the actual quest to kill quest. We'll have to go do that. And now we've got our quest objective. Oh, there's a big angry roach. Let's see. He might kill me with him just bare boxing him. He's angry. Oh, no. Okay, so very hard in Sanctuary. Not that hard. But we got it. There we go. Completed. Kill the Red Roach Menace. Run back and let's ring that bell. There we go. And simple fetch quest complete. So I forgot to rename it Simple Kill Quest, but I'll get that fixed before we package these resources up. So that's it. That's all I got to do to track a kill on an individual character. So lots more to come in the quest making tutorial series, and I'm going to continue to pimp out my favorite tutorial designer, Sedden4494. Does a ton of stuff on quests, lots of stuff on YouTube. He doesn't really make them anymore, but he made a whole lot back in the day right after the Creation Kit came out. So if you're looking to keep going with this and you want to run ahead of me, head over there. A lot of information to pick up.